大家好，今日嘅都會香港專題講座係由香港公共圖書館同香港大學教育資助委員會研究資助局所合辦。大學教育資助委員會研究資助局多年嚟一直支持香港高等學府進行各項研究，並透過舉辦公眾講座同大眾分享研究成果。我哋公共圖書館好高興可以同香港大學教育資助委員會研究資助局合辦今次一系列嘅都會香港專題講座，而今日嘅主題係提升香港公司競爭力。我哋好榮幸請到香港浸會大學財務及決策學系系主任 Professor Aristotelis Stouraitis 同埋香港嶺南大學管理學學系陳婷婷副教授嚟做我哋嘅主講嘉賓。今日第一場講座嘅講題係推行公司管治嘅最佳標準，由 Professor Aristotelis 以英語主講，香港浸會大學會提供粵語傳譯服務。Professor Aristotelis 係香港浸會大學財務及決策學系教授及系主任，香港浸會大學公司管治與金融政策研究中心主任。2000年至2010年間喺香港城市大學任教，佢持有希臘美國學院經濟、會計學及金融學學士、法國歐洲工商管理學院管理學碩士及英國倫敦帝國理工學院金融學博士。教授嘅研究興趣為企業金融，主要着重企業改造及公司管治。佢嘅研究曾喺多份國際學術期刊內刊登，亦曾於多個國際學術組織，如美國國家經濟研究局等所舉辦嘅國際會議中發表論文。佢嘅研究亦曾被南北美、歐洲及香港嘅報章同雜誌，包括《經濟學人》、著名德國金融日報 Handelsblatt 等引用。香港作為國際金融中心，佢嘅競爭力有賴為上市公司維持高標準嘅公司管治，因此為香港上市嘅本地同中國公司提供最佳標準嘅公司管治方法尤其重要。透過進行一系列嘅學術研究，香港浸會大學嘅公司管治與金融政策研究中心對香港及中國嘅監管機構、政策制定者同埋商業機構喺公司管治嘅方法上有重大嘅影響。其中最重要嘅體現係包括同香港上市公司商會合辦嘅公司管治卓越獎，以及與香港董事學會合辦嘅上市公司企業管治水平報告，令好多上市公司喺公司嘅管治方法上得到具體嘅改進，同時亦提高咗由多個專業學會所倡導嘅公司管治方法嘅水準，以及所舉辦嘅相關教育活動水平。喺第一場講座之後會有問答時間，大家可以先將問題寫喺問題紙，再喺答問時間交俾在場嘅工作人員。在線參與者如果想向講者提問，可由而家直至Professor Aristotelis 分享完結時電郵至 rgc@ugc.edu.hk， 並列明標題給講者的問題。有關問題會轉交喺講者喺問答環節中回應。而家有請 Professor Aristotelis。Please, Aristotelis.
Thank you. So I would like to thank the UGC for inviting me to give this talk.
好多謝 UTC 今日邀請Professor 過嚟去進行呢個講座。
And I would like to thank all of you for coming to listen to me on a Sunday afternoon.
亦都感謝大家喺星期六嘅晏晝過嚟參與呢個講座，去聽教授嘅一啲分享。
I wouldn't do it if I were in your place.
教授佢話佢自己本人就未必會做相同嘅一個活動。
So this talk is about how we promote what we do at Hong Kong Baptist University to promote good corporate governance practice across Hong Kong.
呢一個講座會係有關香港浸會大學喺推行公司管治嘅最佳標準嗰陣時所做過嘅一啲項目。
So first of all, what is corporate governance? So I will give you a definition. It's not very complicated, I hope.
首先第一個要探討嘅問題就係乜嘢係公司管治呢？呢度我哋有一個定義，咁就其實唔係太複雜嘅。
So by corporate governance, we mean ways in which suppliers of finance to companies assure themselves of getting a return on their investment.
公司治理其實就係以唔同嘅方式保障各個為企業提高融資嘅單位，我哋叫佢做企業嘅融資提供者，令到佢哋喺企業入邊嘅投資可以取得回報。
If you think about it, the first time a company issues stock, you buy the stock and you hand your money to the company.
如果你思考一下，其實當你投資喺一間公司嗰度，咁你會將你啲錢放落去公司嘅股票入邊。
So how do you make sure that you get something back in return? You get your money back. You get some return on your investment.
你點樣去確認你嘅投資可以取得一個回報？
So how the suppliers of finance, the public who buys the stock, get the managers to return some of the profits back to them?
譬如企業嘅融資提供者，佢哋點樣可以令到管理層將部分嘅利潤返還翻俾佢哋？
And how do they make sure that the managers do not steal the money and run away, or they invest it in bad projects?
佢哋點樣確保管理層唔會竊取佢哋喺公司入邊投資嘅資源，或者將佢哋投資嘅資源投資喺一啲冇咁好嘅項目入邊呢？
And how can they control the managers to make sure that they don't waste the money?
佢哋點樣去監察或者管控公司嘅管理層，去保證管理層唔會浪費佢哋喺公司入邊投資嘅資金呢？
So here is a typical company.
呢一個係一個好基本嘅公司架構。
The company's owners who own the equity are the shareholders.
企業其實係由股權持有者，即係股東所持有。
The shareholders elect a board of directors to represent their interests.
股東將會以投票嘅方式去推舉董事會，去代表佢哋嘅利益，同埋監督管理層。
And the board of directors appoints management.
董事會佢哋會任命管理層。
And management runs the company on a daily basis.
而管理層就會處理企業嘅日常管理事務。
Now, how do we make sure that the managers act in the best interests of the shareholders?
我哋點樣確保管理層嘅行為係符合所有股東嘅最佳利益呢？
So how do we make sure that the shareholders monitor the board and the board monitors the management?
我哋點樣去保證股東佢哋可以監管到個董事會，而董事會又可以監管到管理層？
This mechanism is what corporate governance is about.
呢一個機制其實就係公司管治架構嘅其中一個重點。
So at HKBU, we have two projects that hopefully help improve corporate governance in Hong Kong.
浸會大學我哋現時做緊兩個項目，去幫助提升香港嘅公司治理水平。
And the first project is a corporate governance scorecard with the Hong Kong Institute of Directors.
第一個項目我哋做緊嘅係香港董事學會上市公司企業管治水準報告。
And the second project is the Corporate Governance Excellence Awards that we organize together with the Chamber of Hong Kong listed companies.
第二個項目就係香港公司管治與環境社會及管治卓越獎。呢一個項目我哋係同香港上市公司商會共同舉辦嘅。
So I will discuss what we do in these two projects and how it helps Hong Kong.
我哋會進一步去探討呢兩個項目究竟係做啲乜，同埋佢哋點樣可以幫助到香港嘅上市公司管治水平。
So first of all, the Corporate Governance Scorecard. This is commissioned by the Hong Kong Institute of Directors, and I co-organized this with Professor Stephen Chong from the Hong Kong Education University of Hong Kong.
呢一個項目，香港董事學會上市公司企業管治水準報告係由香港董事學會組織，並且由香港浸會大學 Professor Aristotelis 同埋另外一位教授 Stephen Chong 去共同執行嘅。
So what we do through this project is first of all to encourage the adoption of best practices for corporate governance across Hong Kong through a systematic evaluation of the current practices of companies.
呢一個項目嘅其中一個目標就係通過對現行做法進行一個系統性嘅評估，去鼓勵香港採用企業管治嘅最佳標準。
And we create a framework to assess the corporate governance practices of companies.
我哋透過呢個項目建立咗明確嘅方法或者係框架，去評估公司治理方面嘅實踐。
And some very specific criteria to measure how good the corporate governance is.
我哋亦都制定咗具體嘅標準同埋衡量工具，去評估企業喺呢一方面嘅一個表現。
So it's a hopefully carefully designed scorecard and scoring system.
呢一個係一個精心設計嘅計分卡同埋評分系統。
The results I will present today are from the for financial year 2018.
我哋嘅評分系統係由2018年財政年度嘅資訊。
The scoring is based on publicly available information.
公開信息嗰度去進行評估。
Which is the information that you or I have access to if we want to buy the stock.
呢啲公開信息，如果你有興趣去投資嗰一個股票，咁你其實都可以喺唔同嘅渠道嗰度揾得到。
So the advantages, the pros of this approach is that it is objective, avoids any subjectivity bias.
呢一個研究方法嘅優點就係佢係從客觀嘅角度出發，避免咗主觀角度出發所產生嘅一啲偏見。
It is not dependent on the firm's willingness to talk to us because we base it on publicly available information.
另外一個好處就係佢並唔受企業嘅參與意願所限制，因為其實我哋所做嘅嘢都係建基於一啲公開嘅資訊。
And that's the disadvantage as well because it is not as comprehensive and informative as doing an internal assessment with interviews.
但係呢一個方法亦都有佢嘅缺點，譬如佢哋唔會好似內部評估嗰個方式一樣咁全面同埋資訊咁詳實。
And captures only what is publicly disclosed.
另外就係呢一個研究方法只可以以公開資訊去判斷企業嘅相關表現。
So we score 135 companies that belong to 4 major indices in Hong Kong. I will discuss about the indices a little later.
喺樣本嘅選取方面，我哋選取咗135間公司，咁佢哋係遍佈咗喺唔同嘅恒生指數類別嗰度。咁我哋陣間會再繼續去同大家分享多一啲嘅資訊。
So these are the 135 largest companies listed in Hong Kong.
呢度個表上面嘅一啲公司，其實就係135間喺香港規模最大嘅一啲公司嚟嘅。
And most of them belong to consumer goods.
其中有好多公司係消費品嘅類別嘅公司。
Financials.
金融類嘅公司。
And property and construction.
同埋地產及建築行業嘅公司。
Now, for designing the scorecard, we refer to the OECD, Organization for Economic Development and Cooperation. Organization for Economic Development。
評分卡嘅設計方面，咁評分卡嘅設計其實我哋係跟隨翻OECD，即係經濟合作與發展組織嘅一啲重要原則去制定嘅。
Which is an internationally recognized organization.
而 OECD 佢本身係一個國際認可嘅機構。
It recognizes 5 general principles of corporate governance.
我哋跟隨咗佢哋提出嘅5個主要喺公司管治方面嘅原則。
And within its principle, we have a number of questions.
喺每一個原則或者部分方面，我哋會有一系列嘅問題。
That we scored 203 questions in total. 203 questions in total.
OK， 去俾公司去評估佢哋自己嘅一啲表現。
And we give scores to each question from 0, which means bad, to 10, which means excellent.
每條問題佢都會有一個評分嘅基準，咁評分咧可以係0，即係表示佢哋嘅表現並未係達到一個好理想嘅水平，去到10，表示佢哋已經達到一個好優異嘅水平。
So the final score is here, the last column, and the average score was 78.44 out of 100.
如果大家睇翻呢一張 slide 嘅話咧，我哋嘅總分咧平均係78.44嘅。
And the average, you can see the averages here by different criterion, according to the 5 different criteria we're using.
而嗰一個總分其實係來自上述見到嘅5個唔同部分嘅一個平均分。
The criteria are rights of shareholders first. Rights of shareholders.
第一個部分咧就係股東權益相關嘅。
Equitable treatment of shareholders.
第二個部分就係股東嘅係咪平等，企業係咪平等咁樣對待緊股東。
The role of stakeholders in corporate governance.
第三個部分就係持份者喺公司治理裏邊嘅角色。
And this third includes what we call also corporate social responsibility and environmental issues.
呢一個部分同時亦都包含咗ESG， 即係環境、社會及管治嘅一啲考慮因素喺入邊。
The fourth is disclosure and transparency.
第四個部分就係講緊公司嘅披露水平同埋披露嘅透明度。
And the final one is board responsibilities.
最後一個部分就係董事會嘅職責。
And as you notice here, the third one in the middle.
今年第三個部分。
This is where we have the largest dispersion from minimum score to maximum score.
呢一個部分裏邊嘅企業咧，佢哋所取得嘅分數個範圍係比較分散嘅。
And this is about how the corporate social responsibility, environmental issues, how to help climate change, etc.
呢一個部分亦都係同企業社會責任頭先講過嘅 ESG 同埋氣候嘅一啲相關問題有關嘅。
So there some companies do excellent, and some companies do quite badly.
所以喺呢一個部分裏邊，有一啲公司做得非常之好，咁有一啲公司佢哋嘅表現可能稍稍比佢哋嘅同業係為低。
If we look by stock index, we have 4 indices: the Hang Seng Index companies, Hang Seng China Affiliated Corporation Index, Hang Seng China Enterprises Index, and Hang Seng Hong Kong Large Capitalization Index.
如果我哋以股票指數作為一個分類的話，咁我哋係有4個唔同嘅類別啦。第一個就係恒生指數，第二個就係恒生香港中資企業指數， 第三個就係恒生中國企業指數，第四個就係恒生綜合大型股指數。
And not surprisingly, companies that belonging to the Hang Seng Index get a slightly higher score than the others.
所以喺呢一頁裏邊，我哋可以見到恒生指數入邊嘅公司，佢哋所取得嘅平均分數係比其他類別嘅公司為高嘅。
If we look at different industries, the industries that perform better are the ones with the green, here energy and financials.
如果我哋以唔同嘅行業去睇公司治理質素，咁做得比較好咧，就係標綠嘅部分。而標綠嘅部分所代表嘅行業咧，就係能源股類別同埋金融股類別。
And the industries that perform slightly worse are the red ones, healthcare and materials.
而表現冇咁好咧，就係標紅嘅一啲行業。咁標紅嘅行業就包括咗保健股同埋原材料類股份嘅公司。
If we look at what happened, if we compare with 2016, which was the last year we did the survey.
如果我哋同2016年嘅評分去對比，咁2016年係我哋對上一次做嘅一個報告嘅時間啦。
And we look at the companies that were already scored in 2016 and are also scored in 2020.
我哋同時評估翻喺2016年同埋2020年兩次報告入邊都有評估過嘅一啲公司。
And we look at the questions that were common to both surveys.
跟住我哋再睇翻我哋192條問題，咁係無論喺2016年間，甚至係2020年間兩次嘅問卷入邊，其實都係相同嘅。
We see that most companies experienced improvements in their score.
我哋見到好多公司都喺公司治理質素上面有一定程度嘅提升。
Very few companies deteriorated.
有少量嘅公司咁就佢哋略有退步。
Now, why corporate governance is important?
點解公司治理係重要嘅呢？
It is important because it affects the company value.
佢重要嘅地方就係佢對公司嘅價值產生一定程度嘅影響。
Or the stock price.
或者佢哋會對公司嘅股價產生影響。
So what we do here is we compare the improvement in corporate governance score from 2016 to 2020.
我哋對比咗唔同公司喺2016年同埋2020年公司治理方面嘅評分。
And what happened to company value over the same time?
同埋佢哋公司喺呢一個期間價值嘅變化。
I will not go deeply into how we measure value. It is a price-to-book ratio for those of you who know. But just believe me, it's a measure of company value.
我喺呢一度暫時唔會再同大家再深入咁樣去探討乜嘢係企業嘅市淨率，因為相信部分我哋參加嘅觀眾亦都已經明白呢一個方法嘅呢一個指標嘅一個意思。咁但係簡單啲嚟講，佢就係代表公司嘅價值。
Now, the value of the average company declined over that period.
有部分公司嘅價值喺呢一個比較嘅時期裏邊有所下降。
But what we see here is that the value of companies that had big improvements in corporate governance declined by less.
一啲公司如果佢哋喺2016至2020年間喺公司治理方面有一個比較明顯嘅進步的話，咁佢哋個價值其實就跌咗4.43%。
So investors pay attention to corporate governance and they prefer to buy the stock of companies that have good corporate governance or improve their corporate governance.
呢一個表其實就反映投資者佢哋係會比較鍾意投資喺一啲 公司治理方面做得比較好嘅公司。
Okay, I will go very briefly into the different categories and some areas where Hong Kong companies are not doing very well, and we might want to see more improvement.
我喺呢一度會簡單地介紹一下每個部分唔同公司嘅一個表現，同埋有一啲我哋覺得可以繼續改進嘅地方。
One is the attendance record of top management in the annual general meeting that the company is conducting every year.
其中一個建議就係、其中一個需要我哋認為公司係需要改進嘅地方，就係董事會成員喺最近2次年度股東大會上面嘅出席記錄。
So in 22% of the companies, the CEO, managing director, or president did not attend at least one meeting during the year, one meeting with shareholders.
喺22%嘅樣本企業入邊，有佢哋嘅首席執行官、董事總經理、總裁係冇出席1次或者2次嘅年度股東大會。另外有1%嘅公司係冇披露相關人士嘅出席記錄。
And 28% of the companies, the chairman of the board did not attend one or both annual general meetings.
喺28%嘅樣本公司入邊，佢哋嘅董事會主席係冇出席1次或者2次嘅年度股東大會。
Now, attendance is important because the annual general meeting is where small shareholders like you and me can go and ask questions to the management.
出席記錄係一個好重要嘅元素，因為年度股東大會係一個可以俾小股東提出疑問或者提出一啲查詢嘅一個地方。
So if they are not there to answer our questions, we have no other way to learn what management is thinking.
所以如果一啲管理層或者係董事會成員冇出席到年度股東大會，咁啲少數股東佢哋就可能冇機會去同管理層進行溝通，或者去查詢一啲佢哋想知道有關公司嘅提問。
And also in 29% of the companies, the chairman of one of the committees on the board, Audit Committee, Compensation Remuneration Committee, Nomination Committee, did not attend again the annual general meeting.
喺29%嘅樣本公司入邊，至少一個委員會，包括審計委員會、薪酬嘅委員會或者提名委員會嘅主席係缺席咗1次或者2次嘅股東大會。
The second category is the equitable treatment of shareholders. And here, I'm not going to tell you what is cumulative voting. It's technical. Cumulative voting is a way of voting that gives more power to small shareholders to elect members on the board of directors.
首先跟住我哋再探討一下企業有冇平等對待股東。咁喺呢一度我哋就唔會好詳細咁樣去探討乜嘢叫做 Cumulative Voting， 即係累積投票制。簡單啲嚟講，累積投票制其實係一種可以喺董事會成員選舉入邊增加小股東影響力嘅投票方式。
And 97% of the companies do not practice cumulative voting in Hong Kong.
而喺我哋嘅樣本公司入邊，大概97%嘅公司佢哋係未採用累積投票制嘅。
Also, for 84% of the companies, shareholders cannot vote over the internet during the annual general meeting.
而當中亦都有84%嘅公司未使用互聯網或者其他電子方式投票。
So they can only vote if they go and attend the annual general meeting in person.
所以啲股東佢哋必須要喺疫情期間親自去出席年度股東大會。
Which again makes it more difficult for small shareholders like you and me to go and vote.
咁樣會令到一啲少數股東喺投票嗰陣時更加困難。
The third category is the role of stakeholders. And here are some areas where less than 50% of the companies receive excellent score. Less than 50% receive excellent score.
呢一個部分我哋會介紹一下持份者嘅角色啦。咁呢一個部分咧，基本上少於一半嘅樣本企業可以喺呢一個部分裏邊攞到一個優秀嘅評分。
So the quality and whether there is external audit of the report on ESG, environmental, social governance issues, or corporate social responsibility. So one area where they don't score high is this one, the quality of the report they have to submit.
咁其中咧喺 ESG 即係環境、社會同埋管治報告，或者係 CSR 或者係企業社會責任報告嘅質量同埋審計方面，呢一個部分咧其實係喺呢一個相關部分其實嘅評分係比較低嘅。
And then providing detailed information on compliance with laws and regulations. Again, many companies don't provide that information in detail.
其次就係其實現時仍然有好多企業冇提供有關於8個社會範疇嘅重要性評估同埋法律合規嘅信息。
Policies and expectations on managing the environmental and social risk on the supply chain.
供應鏈入邊嘅社會同埋環境風險管理嘅期望同埋政策，亦都係一個尚待改善嘅地方。
Now, why this is important? Because maybe I don't pollute myself, but I buy raw materials from other companies that pollute.
呢一個地方佢哋嘅點解咁重要咧？譬如，就算我自己唔會為呢個環境構成污染，但係我可能會向其他嘅一啲供應商採購咗一啲會構成污染嘅產品或者服務。
Or for example, I treat my workers well, but I buy source products from suppliers, let's say in Bangladesh, that may be using child labor.
另外就係有機會，我可能喺一啲使用童工，即係譬如喺孟加拉嘅某一啲工廠嘅一啲供應商嗰度去購買佢哋所生產嘅產品。
So this is about how the companies manage this risk and what information they provide us about their supply chain.
所以呢一個部分其實就係關於企業佢哋點樣去管控相關嘅風險。
And the last one is actions to cultivate corporate citizenship.
最後一個部分就係企業佢哋點樣去為培養自己成為企業公民而所作出嘅行動。
With respect to the fourth category, disclosure and transparency.
我哋喺呢一度介紹翻第四個部分資訊披露同埋透明度。
84% of the companies do not disclose their shareholding structure on the company website.
喺樣本公司入邊，84%嘅公司並未喺佢哋自己嘅公司網站上面上載披露股權結構。
So if you want to find out what are the shareholders and who owns what, from the website you cannot find it.
所以如果你想知道企業背後佢哋股東嘅背景或者身份係邊一個，你可能冇辦法喺佢哋嘅網站上面睇到。
And only 11% of the companies disclose the year-end results less than 2 months after the end of the fiscal year.
樣本公司入邊只有11%嘅公司喺財年結束之後2個月或者更短嘅時間裏邊披露全年業績。
Now, why this is important in Hong Kong, companies must disclose the results up to 3 months after the financial year ends. So if the financial year ends December 31, they must disclose the results, profit, sales, everything, March 31.
點解呢一樣嘢係咁重要呢？ 根據上市條例啦，香港嘅公司佢哋係需要喺財年結束之後3個月以內披露財務業績。所以如果一間公司嘅財年係喺12月31號結束嘅話，大部分嘅公司佢哋都會喺3月下旬去披露業績。
And during this time, insiders of the company, if they know the result already, they may be able to trade on the stock when you and I still don't know the result.
喺呢一段期間，公司嘅內部人士有機會可以透過內部資訊去獲利，因為佢哋喺準備財務業績嗰陣時，其實大概已經了解到公司嘅情況，咁但係相關信息仍然未向市場公佈，所以你同我係唔會有方法去得知到相關嘅信息。
So the earlier they disclose the result after the financial year finishes, the less opportunity insiders have to trade on the stock.
所以如果公司可以喺財年結束之後盡快地公佈業績，咁內部人士根據內幕信息進行交易嘅期限或者機會就會更加短。
And only 46 half the companies disclose the results by quarter, and most of these are listed elsewhere, have dual listings in another exchange, maybe the US, that requires them to file quarterly results.
而樣本公司之中，只有46%嘅公司佢哋係會披露季度業績，大多數其實亦都係因為要滿足兩地上市嘅要求。
And finally, compared to with respect to the fifth category, responsibilities of the board.
我哋會介紹返第5個部分，就係董事會職責。
45% of the companies do not mention whether they have a whistleblowing policy in place.
樣本公司入邊有45%嘅公司並冇提及佢哋有冇舉報政策。
So we don't know if I'm an employee and I find out that my boss is paying a bribe, for example, is there a policy that I can report this to the company?
喺冇一個舉報政策嘅存在嘅情況之下，如果係某一間企業嘅員工知道嘅譬如知道我嘅上司係進行咗賄賂，咁我係冇方法或者去渠道去向公司舉報返相關嘅一啲資訊。
And then 54 to 64% of companies do not conduct evaluation by the board of the CEO, managing director or president annually.
另外就係樣本公司入邊56%或者64%嘅公司並唔會進行董事會或者包括首席執行官、董事總經理同埋總裁嘅年度績效評估。
And 40% of the companies do not require the director to withdraw from a meeting when a matter is discussed in which the director has an interest.
而另外樣本公司入邊40%嘅公司咧喺討論同某位董事相關嘅事項嗰陣時，而嗰個董事喺嗰一個事項裏邊存在重大利益嘅時候，佢哋並冇要求到相關嘅董事退出會議。
So the idea here is that, let's say the meeting discusses my compensation, how much I will get paid, and I'm not asked to stay out while the board discusses. So I know who voted for me and who voted against me.
例如果相關嘅董事會議題係同我嘅薪酬相關嘅，即係譬如我下一年會攞幾多工資或者會有幾多花紅，但係我同時冇被要求退出呢個董事會嘅討論嘅時候，咁我就會知道邊一位董事係投贊成票，邊一位董事係投反對票。
Another area where Hong Kong companies is not doing very well is gender diversity.
另外一個現時嚟講，香港上市公司之中唔係話做得特別好嘅地方，就係性別多元化。
As you can see here, only around 10% of directors are female on Hong Kong boards.
譬如喺呢一頁所展示一樣啦，喺香港嘅上市公司之中，大概只有10% 嘅董事係女性。
So usually Hong Kong boards have roughly 9 or 10 members on average, so there is only one female director.
現時嚟講，有好多香港上市公司，佢哋嘅董事會係由9至10位成員構成，咁當中可能只有1位係女性嘅董事。
And currently there is some debate on whether the stock exchange, the regulators should impose quotas of female directors on companies in Hong Kong.
目前社會亦都對呢一個議題有所關注，亦都係辯論緊嘅。咁佢哋就喺度辯論緊，應唔應該定明董事會入邊女性董事嘅最低數目。
Now here we have the top 10 companies that got the highest scores. They are ranked by stock code, so they are not ranked by the score. They are ranked by stock code. So these are the top 10 companies that receive the highest scores in this exercise.
喺呢一頁裏邊，我哋披露咗按公司嘅股票代碼，而唔係按公司治理嘅得分。咁排名最高嘅前10間公司嘅結果。
So it's CLP Holdings, Hang Seng Bank, MTR Corporation, Hang Lung Properties, China Everbright, Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing Limited, Link Real Estate Investment Trust, Lenovo, Costco and Standard Chartered.
前10位嘅公司就係包括中電、恒生銀行、港鐵、恒隆地產、中國光大國際、港交所、領匯房地產信託基金、聯想、中遠海航同埋渣打銀行。
And those with the green arrow means that they were not in the top 10 in 2016 and they made top 10 this year. So Hang Lung, China Everbright, Link and Standard Chartered.
你哋喺呢一版嗰度應該會見到綠色箭嘴嘅。綠色箭嘴佢哋就係表示喺2020年進入前10名嘅公司，咁就係包括恒隆地產、中國光大、領匯房地產信託基金同埋渣打銀行。
And they replaced HSBC, Sinuk, China Shenhua and AAC Technologies. They were in the top 10 in 2016, but they are not in top 10 in 2020.
佢哋取代咗匯豐銀行、中海油、神華同埋瑞星科技。咁呢一啲嘅公司，佢哋喺2016年係進入咗前10名嘅，咁但係喺2020年嘅時候已經離開咗前10。
So this exercise is not about blaming companies.
呢一個結果嘅一個含義啦，呢一個並唔係一個對企業批評指點嘅項目。
But it's important for policymakers, companies and the public.
但係呢一個項目對政策制定者、企業同埋公眾提供咗重要嘅信息。
The scores of the individual companies are not made public.
樣本公司所取得嘅分數唔會被公開。
However, the Hong Kong Institute of Directors knows the scores.
但係香港董事學會佢哋知道各個公司嘅評分。
And it contacts the companies that have not done very well and asks them to get some feedback on their performance and improve.
佢哋可以主動去溝通一啲喺某方面做得唔係幾好嘅公司，咁去睇下會唔會有進一步嘅提升空間。
Also, some companies ask for a feedback report on their performance, which is confidential.
同時有啲公司亦都可以要求索取相關嘅反饋報告，咁相關嘅反饋報告係保密嘅，唔公開嘅。
So there was a large company that they were surprised that they didn't make the top 10, and then they asked us to give a detailed report on how they performed, and then they make improvements based on that.
有啲公司佢哋因為冇進入到前10而感到有一啲驚喜啦，咁所以嗰一啲公司佢哋就會主動咁樣去接觸返董事學會嗰度索取報告，咁就睇下佢哋點樣去可以進一步去改善返佢哋喺公司治理方面嘅一啲表現。
What we have here is this exercise started in 2004. I have been involved in the last two. As you can see, there is a gradual increase over time in the score that the average company gets.
呢一項調查係喺2004年首次進行嘅，而教授就參與咗最近2次嘅調查。咁喺呢一個表裏邊可以睇到，企業喺呢一啲評分之中所獲得嘅平均分有一個穩步上升嘅趨勢。
And here are the number of questions included in each survey. As you can see, the number of questions increases.
另外啦，喺問卷入邊，我哋所提出嘅一啲問題嘅數量亦都有所增加。
And that is because best practices in corporate governance evolve and improve over time.
咁樣係因為良好嘅公司治理並唔係一成不變嘅，而係一個動態不斷持續改善嘅過程。
So new requirements are added on companies.
因此隨住時間嘅推移，咁各個團體或者各個單位亦都會對公司嘅治理提出一啲新嘅要求。
So good corporate governance is an evolving process, evolves over time. The standards and best practice rise continuously. Compliance requirements by regulators are upgraded every time. Recently, we have a lot more on ESG. And the aim is not to move to minimum compliance, but to best practice go beyond the minimum.
好嘅公司治理係一個不斷發展嘅動態過程。喺當中標準同埋公司治理嘅標準同埋最佳實踐將會不斷咁發展同埋提升。咁另外監管機構嘅合規要求亦都會不斷嘅升級。例如最近大家都比較關注 ESG 方面嘅問題啦。咁建議我哋係由企業符合最低合規要求嘅取態轉變成主動去推行最佳實踐，因為咁樣可以帶嚟好多好處。
So I can move to the second project, which is the Corporate Governance Excellence Awards with the Chamber of Hong Kong Listed Companies.
咁第二個項目咧，我哋就想介紹嘅咧就係香港公司管治與環境社會及管治卓越獎。呢一個獎項係由香港上市公司商會同埋浸會大學共同創立同埋舉辦。
As you can see, there are some important people during the announcement of the award. We have the Undersecretary for Finance.
你哋可以喺呢一張相嗰度見到有一啲比較重要嘅人物，亦都喺我哋嘅晚宴嗰度出現咗。譬如我哋嘅財政司司長。
And the chairman of the Chamber of Hong Kong Listed Companies.
另外就係香港上市公司商會嘅主席。
And I'm not very important. I'm sitting at the back. The other award recipients, I'm here at the back.
喺後排咧就包括咗教授同埋一啲得獎者。
That was 2019, but 2020 I was in the front.
張相其實講緊就係2019年，不過2021年教授係企喺第一排嘅。
So the first time we did this awards was 2007.
呢一個獎項係喺2007年起舉辦。
And these awards aim to foster excellence in corporate governance, which includes shareholder rights, compliance, integrity, fairness, responsibility, accountability, transparency, independence of the board, leadership, corporate social responsibility.
呢一個獎項旨在鼓勵企業不斷提升股東權利、合規、誠信、公平、責任、問責、透明度、 董事會獨立性同領導力，以及推行社會責任等各方面嘅一啲問題啦。
And there are 3 stages to the awards. First of all, the applicants conduct a self-assessment of their practices to identify strengths and weaknesses.
咁呢一個獎項係由3個階段組成嘅。第一個階段就係參賽者會對佢哋自己嘅公司治理活動進行自我評估，去鑑定返佢哋唔同地方嘅強項弱項同埋需要改進嘅一啲領域。
And the first screening process takes place at Hong Kong Baptist University.
第一次篩選呢就會喺浸大嗰度舉行嘅。
And the final screening process takes place following interviews in front of the judging panel that has industry experts.
第二次篩選亦都係最終嘅篩選過程，就會喺企業代表同行業專家嘅評審團做完面談之後進行。
And there are more than 130 publicly listed companies that have participated in the award process in the last 7 years.
喺過去嘅7年之間，有超過130間上市公司參與咗評選。
And more than 80 passed the first stage and were invited for interviews in front of the judging panel.
期間亦都有超過80人係通過咗第一次篩選，並且獲邀同評審團進行面談。
And those are both Hong Kong-based and mainland-based companies listed in Hong Kong.
其中嗰80位人士係嚟自香港同埋中國內地嘅公司。
And there are basically 6 awards. I will not go to all there are different categories. No need to go through all of them. And there is also an award on sustainability.
咁我哋有6個獎項組別，但係我哋就唔再詳細介紹每一個獎項組別啦。咁但係另外我哋亦都有一個持續發展嘅卓越獎。
So these are the companies that have won awards in the last 7 years.
喺表入邊見到嘅就係喺過去7年獲得公司管治卓越獎嘅一啲得獎者。
I'll leave you 1 minute to read the companies.
我哋俾1分鐘時間你去睇下我哋嘅得獎者。
And these are companies that won the Sustainability Award.
而呢一頁佢哋展示嘅就係持續發展卓越獎嘅得獎者。
And some have won both.
有一啲公司係成功取得公司治理同埋持續發展嘅獎項。
So here, these awards foster recognition of best practices in corporate governance.
呢一個獎項其實係促進咗對公司管治最佳實踐嘅一個認可。
And as we are told during the interviews, many companies have made changes to their corporate governance practices based on the comments they received during the interview they took last year, for example.
其中有好多參加者根據佢哋喺面試過程裏邊所收到嘅評論或者資訊，去對佢哋嘅公司管治實踐進行咗改變。
So thank you again for attending this talk.
多謝各位。
而家係第一場講座嘅問答時間，如果現場有題目咧，可以寫問題紙嘅。We got the questions from the audience. Only 11% of companies disclose year-end results 2 months or less than after fiscal year. Due to disclosure or transparency, this would pose additional work pressure for auditors in such a short period of time. 3 months after fiscal year would be a reasonable time. Do you agree? Sometimes even 3 months would not be enough if there are lots of problems unsettled in their financial results.
Yes, I agree that auditors have a tough job.
首先條問題就係講緊 條問題就係首先頭先提出嘅問題咧，就係講緊喺每一個公司財年結束之後3個月去必須披露到佢哋嘅財務業績。咁對於一啲外部審計師嚟講係一個好沉重嘅工作負擔。咁有啲企業如果佢哋有比較多嘅問題的話，3個月甚至係唔係太足夠嘅。你認唔認同呢一個嘅講法咧？咁頭先教授就開始作出咗佢嘅回應啦。咁佢哋就話頭先教授就話佢認同審計師係一個非常艱難嘅工作。
So yes, it is a tough job for auditors.
準備業績係對外部審計師嚟講係一個好巨大嘅工作啦。
So I'm not being very tough on companies here if they don't disclose the result early.
所以教授對公司如果冇喺一個短時間之內去披露佢哋嘅業績嘅話，佢唔算係話取態非常之強硬。
But the idea is the earlier they do it, the better.
但係佢認為上市公司仍然有改進嘅空間。
多謝 ，Thank you, Professor. That's the end of 我哋第一場講座完結啦，唔該晒。
Okay, thank you. Thank you.